In the last video, I talked a lot about the efficiency of DOEs. First, there's the efficiency of running multiple factors at the same time. And then there's the increasing the already great efficiency with fractional factorials. Now I'm going to cover how we can do even better than that with DOEs, which really honestly makes experimental design orders of magnitude better than one factor at a time testing. I'm going to cover two processes in this video. The first is the process of running a single experiment, sort of start to finish. The second is a higher level process of using a series of experiments, right? So stacking those single experiments together. Now, the process of running a single experiment is not necessarily as linear as I'm about to describe, and it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all thing. Specifically, the design of the experiment itself might see some iterations. But as an example, it goes something like this. First, identify what information or knowledge you're seeking. Teams need really to know this to make the right design choices of the experimental design. Basically, all the other things I'm about to say after this depend on it. Second, what's being measured? That is, what is the response that you care about, the important thing. Third, identify what factors will be tested. What knobs are going to be turned during this experiment to impact the response, or try to anyway. Fourth, what is the structure of the experiment? Is it a definitive screening? Is it a half fractional? Is it a central composite design? And there can be some fairly complicated details, down in there that might need to be worked out, so keep that in mind. Fifth, at what levels will the factors be run? For example, if temperature is a factor, will it run at 20 degrees Celsius and 25 degrees Celsius? Or will it be 10 degrees and 50 degrees Celsius? And that would really make a big difference what those levels that you're setting are. And like the three previous items, it largely depends on what are you trying to learn. Sixth, you need to determine the sample size of the experiment. Now, in experiments, this manifests through the number of replicates of that experiment. A DOE is made up of runs using a different combination of factors, where all the knobs are set, right, for any given run. Each different combination is called a treatment condition. Replicates are how many times you run all of the treatment conditions, right? The set of treatment conditions for that design. Seventh, work out the logistics. Who's running what? Who's measuring that other thing? How are the samples going to work? Etc. Eighth, you start to run the experiment, realize something's messed up in one of the earlier steps, and you go back and fix it. Eighth, the sequel, the experiment fully run, is running the full experiment, collecting all the data, bringing it back. Ninth, analyze the data that you collected. Notice that the last two steps are actually pretty straightforward. Actually conducting the experiment and analyzing the data, they're generally not a challenge. Sometimes there can be significant logistics to running an experiment, getting the materials, etc. But even then, they're typically just things that need to be worked out and can just be worked out. Not like the head-scratching, inducing earlier steps. So that's just a single experiment. But DOEs are most powerful and efficient when used in a series. So let's get into that. Remember, DOEs are a tool to find and follow a path of gaining knowledge. And since product development is an exercise in gaining knowledge, DOEs are an exceptionally valuable tool in innovative product development. What might a series of DOEs look like? What is it that I am talking about here? There's any number of paths, again, but here's an example. Say you're on a team developing an alternative to a typical computer mouse. You've landed on a design that's just a bracelet. It's just sitting there and you get to play with it. Now, it's got a couple dozen sensors in it, your design does, and they're sensors of different types. The team doesn't have a firm grasp on how the form factor and the material composition impact the performance of the stress sensors that are in there. There are others as well, but the stress sensors are being a bit problematic. So they start with a highly efficient screening DOE, including 8 different factors. They don't want to waste time and sample size trying to model the entire relationship yet, aka determine a transfer function. They're just trying to determine what are the actually true impactful factors. From that DOE, that screening DOE, They learn that a couple of dimensions and a couple of material properties clearly impact the performance of the stress factors. So the team decides to run another DOE to get a decent model of how those factors, those 4 factors, impact the performance. They include the 4 impactful factors and narrow the test range on them because they can bring those levels in a bit. And then from that second DOE, they've got a good mathematical model of the stress sensor performance. And again, how those factors impact that stress sensor performance. They've also learned that one of the dimensions and the compression modulus are really the 2 dominant factors out of those 4. So the team sets aside the other 2 factors, the non-dominant ones, at easy to achieve levels. Maybe for cost purposes or ease of manufacturing or whatever. They're still within that range that they tested, but they can just set them to be. And then the team runs a third DOE to optimize the 2 dominant factors for the sensor performance, right? They get a great surface response graph that will allow them to optimize the final design parameters. They're not quite done yet because this is, a best practices sort of team. So lastly, they run a robust design DOE pair. The first is a noise DOE and then a co-optimization DOE. In the end, the team has an optimized design that's robust against user variability, environmental conditions, and all sorts of other noise factors. So that's what it's like to run a series of DOEs and what it might look like. And you don't just get there with a single DOE. And you sure as, insert your own favorite expletive here, aren't going to get anywhere near that with 1 factor at a time experiments. So wrapping it all up. You've got the Intra-DOE process, the steps you go through for each DOE, and the Inter-DOE process, getting really the most out of your experimental designs by conducting a series of them along a learning path. There you go.